Next, I'm delighted to welcome Graham Cliff from the University of Manchester on the environmental, social and medical implications of light pollution. Okay, we're ready to go.
Okay, folks, now you're hearing me well? It's 43 years ago since I started lecturing, and I would tell the technician or whoever was in charge of the AV, next slide, please. So this is a baptism of fire for me, because this is the first PowerPoint presentation I've ever made, and if it fails, it's not me, it's the technology. So, as the slide shows you, I'm Graham Cliff. Now, my co-author, Colin Henshaw, I'll be saying a little bit more about him, is the author of the title. And this should have been presented last year in Vienna, and I was given the opportunity of presenting it this year here in Armagh. And quite frankly, to do justice to that title, there's no way I can do it in 20 minutes. And because we're running behind time, I'm going to give you what I would call a broad brush lecture. Now, basically, I'm not going to go into any of the nitty-gritty as best I can. I'll avoid it. Some will have to be there. But I don't like being described as an expert in my field, because I heard 2 weeks ago that an expert is a has-been pressurized drip. Now, let's press on. Now, what I've learnt in only 3 years is that light pollution is being seen now as a symptom of the 24-hour day. We've already had reference to the 24-hour day, a symptom. And it's just one of many other symptoms of the hidden harm being done, some of which were described by my colleague in a letter to the Journal of the British Astronomical Association in 1994. And there it is. Now, for God's sake, don't try reading it. I'm partially sighted and I've had to use a monocular to read some of the text. But the important thing here is that I had heard about this as a story, the environmental effects of light pollution, 1994, and Colin used to badger on about this until, you got fed up with it. Go away, Colin. But he'd done this on the back of a letter written by, or rather, a lecture given in 1993 at Reading University by Robin Scadgel, and you'll have seen some of Robin's pictures in John's talk earlier this morning. And Robin had been talking about glowworms in the UK. And Colin had thought, big problem this, light pollution is going to be the cause. And you'll see that the reference to Robin, top left, if anyone can read it, is reference number 1. There's only one reference, Misen Bob 1994 in the proceedings of the BAA. Goes back a long way. Now, the presentation itself has taken many years to consolidate. And now, in 2009, we have the CFDS handbook, Blinded by the Light. And this is the basis for this presentation. Now, if you don't like anything that I say, go to this, reread it. If I miss anything out or get it wrong, whatever, read this. It's got astronomy, the environment, lighting and crime, and health issues. It's an excellent read. That's my opinion as the author of Chapter 2, and I helped Bob edit it. Now, Colin and I, as I say, wrote Chapter 2, the sometimes hidden adverse environmental effects of light pollution. But I know some of you know me, many of you know Colin rather better, but I thought for the people who don't know Graham Cliff and Colin Henshaw, I'd answer the question, who are me? Well, astronomy began for us with the space race. I was 7 years old when it started in 1957, but by 1968, Colin and I were actively involved with amateur astronomy and Altrincham and District Astronomical Society. And there we are on the left of the picture, Colin in his inevitable cap, me, the handsome young man, standing beside him, holding the sign. And we were brought together by the guy on the far right, Fred Talbot. So that was 1968, 41 years ago. And what you can see there are the foundations of our astronomical observatory that I designed, and those three people helped me build. Now, Colin is somewhat better known as a very active amateur astronomer, and he just happened to be in Zimbabwe when, golly gosh, this star exploded in the Magellanics. He co-discovered supernova 1987A, and it was discovered by Richard Shelton in Chile, Albert Locke in New Zealand. Colin and Albert think that the Australians were in the pub having a quick tinny. And James Muirden, well known to the BAA people here, gives Colin credit for this in his book, and so too now does Wikipedia. And here's Jim Muirden. Nick James tells me that this was at an astronomer meeting in 2004, and the question asked was, who's F.W. Talbot, problem star in Taurus? Well, that's Fred Talbot, as he's now known in Britain. He's the TV weatherman for the north of England, and he used to do the weather from a floating TV weather map in Albert Dock. Okay, so what? But he's more well known for this event, and it's an outtake TV picture when a streaker jumped onto the map, ran across it on live broadcast television. Now, as Michael Caine would say, not a lot of people know that he's actually co-discoverer with Stan Dvorak of the June Lyrids in 1967. But who the hell am I? What's my connection with astronomy? Well, I've been, as I say, an amateur astronomer. Because I couldn't afford a telescope, I was heavily into meteor astronomer. So I used to accompany Colin and Fred and do meteor astronomy, froze to death watching the quadrantids, was amazed by the Perseids, and I missed the Leonids in 1966 by about 6 hours. The Americans were getting 4,000 to 10,000 an hour. But I'm actually known for being the silhouetted figure with the telescope on the roll-off observatory that we had in Timperley on David Icker's book, Beginner's Guide to Amateur Astronomy, and Astronomy Now, which discuss professional astronomers. So my hobby takes me to the opportunity of seeing the universe, but professionally I'm a nanotechnologist. I analyse atoms in the analytical electron microscope, and this is the inauguration of a laboratory at Lehigh University where I did my sabbatical. The guy on the podium is there described as being Peter Lickins. For those from Arizona, Peter became president of Arizona State University, I'm told. And I was in touch with him 2 weeks ago, asking him to get involved with the IDA. He tells me he doesn't have the time. Now, I'm just going to come back to this. Now, can anyone read it at the back? Because if you can't, there's no point me reading it myself. I'm not going to be able to see it well enough at this distance. It's too small. But in that, Colin predicted that street lighting would have an effect on insects. They'd fly around the light, they'd collapse to the floor and just die. So insectivores would starve. And I thought, gosh, this is clever, Colin. Where's the proof? He then went on to say that light pollution was an environmental concern, and environmental advocates should come together with astronomers because it's not just a problem for astronomy. What he said in 1994 is happening today if you read the press. Now, basically, if light at night is killing insects, it's perhaps an old and hidden DDT. I've subliminally left the message in blue on the bottom because this year Barry Clark got in touch with me from Australia and suggested that maybe it's also the new asbestos. And this to me is of particular interest because I wrote the definitive paper on the identification of asbestos when asbestos was a problem in Duluth in Minnesota. I'll press on, but please remember that light at night may be seriously problematic. Now, this, and again, those at the back, if you can't read it, it's on the presentation that you can read off of the internet or from my website, is something I was told about 2 years ago by Travis Longcore. Now, Travis is the co-editor of this book. I know some of you know of it, The Ecological Consequences of Artificial Night Lighting. Travis edited it with Kath Rich. If you're an astronomer and your library doesn't have a copy of that book, at 20 quid it's a snip. The trouble is, it's so thick, too few people want to read it. But this problem doesn't go back to Colin in 1994. It doesn't even go back to Ken Frank in 1988, a renowned American amateur lepidopterist. It goes back to 1897. And bear with me whilst I just read. An English journal has become alarmed at the relation of electricity to songbirds, which it maintains is closer than that of cats and fodder crops. The fear is expressed that when England is lighted from one end to the other with electricity, the songbirds will die out from the failure of their food supply. Makes you think, doesn't it? 112 years ago. So this is a summary of the environmental effects. I told you I wouldn't go into any detail, but just bear in mind that what is happening now is not because of light pollution per se, which is what the popular public think of. It's a consequence of the 24-hour day that we enjoy. It's denying life its natural circadian rhythm, which I'm told regulates all of life on Earth. It's not just nocturnal creatures like bats which are suffering decline, so too are sparrows, because their chicks starve. Believe it or not, sparrow chicks need protein. They get it from insects. There are too few insects, apparently. So LP, light pollution, sucks insect food supply to its death. Insectivores, therefore, are in world decline. Social effects. I was talking to a paediatric nurse a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying when she read this, because I tested this on her, many children today are sleep-deprived and hyperactive, and they succumb to obesity. And she had a sympathy with that statement. Emergency workers like doctors and nurses who often work overly long shifts risk making poor decisions, and she knows that from experience. Perhaps we should be more concerned about how sustainable is our collective future in the modern 24-hour day. Health effects. Again, I'm going to be brief because Professor Steve Lockley is going to be doing a presentation later. He knows so much more than I do. He's written chapter 4 in the handbook. So again, if you want a document that you can read Steve's chapter. Fine. If we look at the bottom, shift work is only possible with light at night. And only this year, 40 Danish women have received compensation because of breast cancer caused by shift work. Now, last October, I sent this off to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, wanting permission to use the part of the composite showing the Americas, North and South America. And the IUCN had a meeting in Barcelona. And I set it against the night sky picture that we've already seen many times. And I asked that list of questions. Owls, whippoorwills, nightjars, insects and bats have simply lost the night. Not only are the insects disappearing, so insectivores of the night have lost their food supply, but they've lost the night as well to conceal them from predators. Is light at night killing off life on Earth? I get people criticising me for being a doom monger. But this is the email I got back when I sought that permission. Before giving you permission, etc., where did you get the map from? And this is the quote. Don't you think that the correlation you find is due to more general human disturbances than specifically to light? Well, what's happened since then is the IUCN has set up a dark sky advisory group. This happened about April time. This is the statement from June. And because I didn't expect anybody else to be able to read that, I've blown it up a little bit, and the statement discusses the important resolutions that they want to address, and it says there are at least 9 reasons to reduce light pollution and protect a natural sky. The 8th of 9 is astronomy, and that I put up for the astronomers who are here today. And that's my summary. My personal opinion is that if the politicians and the public don't wake up to the truths that we've had expressed today, we really are going to be JTL, just too late. I'd like to thank those from the CFDS and my wife Pauline and the Outdoor Lighting Forum group, which includes Francis Parnell, Sue Harder, John McMahon, Steve Davis, Deborah Norville, and Friedel Pass, who's the OLF and IDA Europe rep. And I thank you, Friedel, for the communication that you've made with me. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Congratulations on your first PowerPoint presentation. It was interesting to see just how far back the awareness of this program or this problem goes. So just one question, I think we have time for if anybody has any. And you may get off lightly because you've covered it so well. Nothing. Okay, that's great. That gets us back in time. Thank you very much indeed, Graham.